If there's one thing that is a guaranteed booster of a cinematic quality of, I would say, any shot, it is the atmospheric haze for sure. It is one of the best tools for creating that highly desirable contrast of foreground and background elements, and it would be a shame not to pick this low-hanging fruit. I'm gonna create a new collection called Haze for this as usual. Then to fill some volume up with haze, we need something like a cube. Okay, now it doesn't need to cover the entire scene, but it can. So I'm extending it all the way to the edges. To hide the cube in the material preview, we need to come over to the viewport display and change the display type to bounds. This way we'll just see its bounding box and that's it. It won't mess up with our 3D cursor as well. Cool. What we can do now is come over to the shader editor with Shift F3 and create a new material there. The default shader can be replaced with a principled volume shader instead. So Shift A, shader, principled volume. As a quick note, it is important to plug it into the volume socket of the material output rather than the surface one. It's easy to miss that thing. Okay, the screen went black because the volume's density doesn't allow any light to punch through, so we can decrease the density to make it look like someone has made a few puffs of steam from a smoke machine or something. 0.01 looks nice, 0.02 is already too hazy for my taste. A sandstorm type of vibe, which is a bit too much. But at least we see the light shafts now, which is a neat byproduct of having haze in your scene. Okay, 0.01 then. Settled. A quick before and after. OMG, it does look incredible though, such simple effect. As we've mentioned in the first chapter, anisotropy can be hard to put in words. I imagine that it allows to shift the scattering in the direction of our light sources, if it's a positive value, let's say, or in the opposite direction if it's negative. I think you can see the difference. The caveat of using a really high anisotropy though is that the fog really gathers around all light sources, even the hidden ones, and it kind of reveals their location, and that's probably a bit awkward. And the negative values should make it look more like a dusty volume rather than a volume composed of gas particles. But I still think that the best way to feel how this really works is to play with this slider yourself. I'll keep it around 0.27 or something to keep it relatively uniform with just a bit of shift towards our lights. It's incredible how much the image depth changes with the addition of the fog, right? It is incredible, I think. Anisotropy could also affect the god ray's appearance. Not always clear in what direction it should be tweaked though, so worth playing with. Another idea that I think is worth trying is to cool down the color of scattering, to add a touch of complementary color contrast going on between the image planes. Just a tiny bit though. What I also love doing is shifting the volume back and forth as a way to adjust the fall-off of the haze. It is possible to make the foreground unaffected by haze and push it more towards the background, or keep it more uniform across the scene. I think I prefer a slightly more gradual fall-off so our robot isn't completely excluded from the haze effect. It feels more integrated when it's like that. So the main thing that the volume lighting does to our shot, well, it does a few things, but it basically sets the contrast of atmospheres, effectively splitting the contrast ratios of foreground and everything else, let's say. This pops the character out naturally. Let me quickly illustrate the contrast ratio thing. The deeper layers are now basically mid-tones with a quite limited contrast. Pretty neutral stuff. While the foreground stuff has really dark tones and brighter highlights. The tonal range is just way wider. To put things in context, that's like comparing 15:1 ratio to something like 2:1. That's what fog does. There could be different looks depending on the volume shader settings, but as a rule of thumb, volume is your friend when it comes to cinematic lighting. To say a few words about the God rays effect, for that kind of effects, actually the area lights with a low spread work really well. We can place some in the background if needed. Even if it doesn't light our character up, it still creates the light shafts. The light power and the density of the medium play an important role there. Obviously, as we make our lights way brighter, the dusty rays become even more prominent as well. That's kind of how these two things are linked. The backlighting is also better for generating light shafts than the lighting that comes from the frontal side. That is not the aesthetic I'm aiming for this scene though, so I won't go in that direction. Just wanted to show some God rays. And now moving on to other volumetric effects.